All right, guys, we're going to talk about how do you communicate with a photographer. We're doing it right now. You guys can do this, but he's not taking photos for us. He's making video of this. So how, like, let's say I go make an order with Virtuous Graphics. What does this look like of, hey, I've got my product. You're going to do photography for me now. Like, how does the communication flow work? And, what should I highlight or know? Like, kind of what point do I, reach out to you guys? And yeah, I'll just let you describe it.
Yeah, sure. So one thing I'll say is like working with our clients, we kind of have clients on two ends of the spectrum. On one end, they pretty much send us their product and they say, we trust your creative freedom, just make it look good. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have people that send us 20 pages of Google Docs with examples of exactly what they want to be in the shot, and very, very detailed instructions. And so the difference of like hiring a firm versus working individually on this is if you send something very broad to a photographer that doesn't have a lot of experience working in e-commerce or Amazon, it's much more likely that you're not going to be satisfied in the end with what you have. Over communicating is definitely going to be more helpful if you're choosing to go and hire your own photographer, but it becomes less important as you have a creative firm. But pretty much the first thing that happens when we move forward with an order is we're going to ask you a bunch of questions about your products. So we're going to ask you, what is your listing? Where are your top competitors? What's included? The really important thing that you need to make sure to send over to your photographer is like, what is actually included in your package. So if there's that extra, product that you put in there to give the value add, make sure you say that, hey, this needs to be included in the photography set. If you have product inserts and you want those to show up, your product packaging, you want that to show up in your main image, make sure that you actually have that in there. But as well, on top of that, we do a lot of research on the back end. Probably about 60% of the work we do happens before we even take a single photo or open up Photoshop. We try to look at reviews, positive and negative, and see, okay, what do people really like about this product? What do people not like about this product? And how can we proactively address that in the image set to kind of answer some of those questions? But if you can do a lot of that work on the back end and you say, hey, one of the things, let's say I'm selling a pizza cutter, for example, right? And one of the questions that people really have is like, hey, can I actually take this thing apart and clean it, right? And so that's a big question. Maybe it's a top rated negative review aspect. And so what you might want to do there is you're indicating, okay, to the photographer, we have to have an image where this thing is actually completely disassembled so that I can quickly see without even infographics that yes, this thing can be taken apart. So the more research you can
Mm.
do on that end, the better you're going to get in terms of images. One thing I'll say, Brock, is like think about your image set. You've got 9 that you can put in your image set. Think about what is the purpose of each image. I don't just want to see this from the front, from the side, from the back. I want to be zoomed in on the textures. I want to be looking at the material. I want to be looking at the bonding point. So if I'm a customer, I can see this looks like it's high quality. You want to be purposeful with all of your images.
Okay, yeah. So really getting clear about. So you guys are going to do research on the whole product market, and obviously you guys did that because we were very vague with you in our test project, and you guys did a good job. But you're obviously limited on time research. Like, you're not going to know the market as good as us. So if we want something very specific to highlight that and bring it to you guys' attention, is that kind of what you're saying?
Look, this is our experience too, even if you're a new seller, like you're investing a lot of time, effort, money into selling on Amazon. So there's a good chance you're going to know your product kind of inside and out in the research. So take a minute, put together, it doesn't have to be a document. I'm a personal fan of videos. They're a little bit easier to make, but just, make a Loom video recording of exactly what you want to be in there, the aspects of your product that are important, and be as detailed as possible for your photographer.
Okay, yeah. So they don't need to like give you the exact angle and everything, but just kind of like a lead of, hey, this is an important aspect, and we want to highlight this because we're better than the competitors at this, and we want maybe this type of feeling, or like ours are the safest in the market, other people's aren't. Like, so, just kind of general stuff like that, and what to highlight, and then you guys will do the creative work on it.
Exactly. Yeah. The more detailed you can be, and don't just think about details of the product. And we're going to talk about this in infographics. We don't just want to talk about what the feature is. We want to talk about what the feature means. So if you're saying, hey, this thing has a protective safety blade, that's the feature. What it means is that it's going to keep your hands safe. So like figure out how to encapsulate that into a photograph, and then you're going to be in a good spot.
Mm. Ooh, like those flame gloves. The
Exactly, right? Like you're going to show the hands in the fire. You're going to show someone actually pulling the hot item out of, out of the oven. And when you can actually see the oven there, it's going to indicate, oh, I can grab something that's hot, rather than just having them near something that's hot. You're going to show it, and even if you don't have text on the screen, it's going to click in your mind as to what this product does.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So we'll go over what types of photos you actually want to get and the purpose, because this is the most important part, and you can't just take random photos. That's not going to work the best. But so you said 95% of people are happy. So those 5% that aren't, is it in the communication, or they just didn't make it very clear, or like kind of where do things go wrong with communication, I guess?
Yeah, so sure. And so it's about half and half. One thing I will say is, like, now when I first got here, we're having a lot more issues with revisions. One of the things that really helps us out a lot is we have a creative director that runs each department. These guys are like subject matter experts. They've been doing photography or design for like 20 plus years. So before we send anything to a client, the creative director kind of kicks it back and says, no, go and change it. If you're working with an individual photographer, there's probably going to be a little bit higher probability that things might get messed up. But just make sure you incorporate that, hey, I get a certain number of revisions for free. And, like I said earlier, it's a creative process. So even if it's not right the first time, by the second or third time, you should be able to get it pretty close. I think creative work is all about making like those marginal improvements that make a really big difference. But in terms of like the reasons that things don't go well, is I think half the time, things weren't communicated, or we just actually made a mistake. Then the other half of the time, you send things to people and for whatever reason it just doesn't work out. Like, for example, and sometimes, like, even us as a company, and I'll admit this to you, is like sometimes even us as a company, there's certain things that we just can't do. Maybe 6 months ago we had a client that had a product in the baby category, and he wanted a Caucasian baby, and for us, like, at the time, we've changed now, but like at the time it was very difficult for us to source Caucasian babies in Philippines.
Yeah, in the
We
Philippines.
can get Caucasian, models that are teenagers and adults and things like that, but babies were really, really difficult to get, and the baby we had just wasn't Caucasian enough for the guy. And like,
Oh
there's,
God.
it sounds kind of funny, but like, it's very realistic. He was very straight up front about what he wanted, and we just couldn't deliver, and so we had to go back and say, hey, we screwed up here. We kind of overpromised it. This is something we could do. So sometimes it's just not going to work with your product. If your photographer is trying to shoot a product, and you want lifestyle shoots, and you're saying, I want you to take these lifestyle shots on a construction site, and you're like, yeah, sure, I can do it, and he tells you can do it, and then 2 weeks later you find out they're photoshopped or it doesn't look good. So sometimes it's just not going to work out if it's very complex what you need.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Nobody can do everything, but you guys got a pretty good suite. So, all right, that's great. If you guys have any questions, let us know below.